Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Happy Thursday, everybody. For viewers in Australia and New Zealand, I also wish you a good Anzac Day. Today we honour those who gave everything so that we may live in freedom and prosperity today. Let's begin with a few salient developments in US-China relations. US Secretary of State Blinken is in China. We will cover the full trip once it has wrapped up on Friday. As we anticipated, the US Senate passed the weapons and aid bill that included the TikTok-related parts with an overwhelming majority, and President Biden signed it into law yesterday. However, the Biden campaign will still be on TikTok while it is in operation. As long expected, TikTok announced Wednesday that it plans to challenge the law in court, setting up a lengthy legal battle that will test the company's argument that the proposal would violate the free speech rights of millions of Americans. In a video posted yesterday, the TikTok CEO told users of the platform, quote, "We believe the facts and the law are clearly on our side, and we will ultimately prevail. Rest assured, we aren't going anywhere," end quote. Beijing isn't quite sure how to react, likely because they understand that a strong defense of the company would likely undermine TikTok's claim that it isn't a Chinese company. In response to a question about the passage of the law, People's Republic of China Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin expressed yesterday, quote, "My colleagues, myself, and the spokesperson of the Ministry of Commerce have previously made clear China's principal position on the US Congress's passage of the bill on TikTok, which you may refer to." End quote. Meanwhile, also yesterday, a group of 7 leading US solar manufacturers filed trade complaints with the Department of Commerce and the US International Trade Commission, formally requesting that the Biden administration impose tariffs on solar products from Chinese firms being exported from Southeast Asia into the United States. As UK-based The Financial Times explains, quote, "They come amid growing alarm within the US solar industry that a flood of cheap Chinese green energy technology exports are pushing down prices of solar panels and threatening efforts by the Biden administration to develop a domestic solar supply chain." End quote. US-based The New York Times explains that Chinese companies have been relocating production of solar products to neighboring countries to avoid existing tariffs. The US manufacturers believe new trade measures are needed to protect their businesses. The complaints call for investigations into the trade practices of Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and Malaysia. In the past year, the United States has imported $12.5 billion worth of solar products from those countries as prices of solar products have dropped by around 50%. A joint statement Wednesday from the Solar Energy Industries Association, American Clean Power Association, Advanced Energy United, and American Council on Renewable Energy said that they are, quote, "deeply concerned," end quote, that the petitions will, quote, "lead to further market volatility across the US solar and storage industry and create uncertainty at a time when we need effective solutions that support US solar manufacturers," end quote. Next up, we move to the Chinese economy. According to official data published by the Ministry of Commerce, foreign investment into China slowed for a third straight month in March compared to the same period last year. According to Bloomberg calculations of the numbers, new actually utilized foreign investment into China was 87 billion yuan, $12 billion last month, down 38% year on year. Inbound investment in the first 3 months of the year was 301 billion yuan, down 26% compared with the same period last year. Of course, this is yet another sign that China continues to have difficulties attracting foreign investment. Geopolitical tensions and uncertain growth outlook have kept many global capitalists hesitant. We remember that an American Chamber of Commerce in China survey of US firms from earlier this year showed nearly half of the respondents had no plans to expand their investment into the country.
If you're enjoying today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. Liking, sharing, and subscribing all helps for the channel. And for anyone who can go that extra mile and help me keep China Update financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is a lot of work, but all your support are all incredible sources of motivation. So thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support.
Next up for the economy, on Tuesday, S&P Global Ratings published a report arguing that China's state-directed economy may be creating the conditions for a new wave of bond defaults that could come as soon as next year. the third round of corporate defaults in about a decade. Charles Chang, Greater China country lead at S&P Global Ratings, speaking to US-based CNBC, explains this week, quote, "The real thing to watch for policymakers is whether the current directives are creating distorted incentives in the economy. China's corporate bond default rate fell to 0.2% in 2023, the lowest in at least 8 years, and far below the global rate of around 2.6%. To a certain extent, this is not a good sign, because we see this divergence as something that's not the result of the functioning of markets. We've seen directives or guidance from the government in the past year to discourage defaults in the bond market. The question is, when the guidance to avoid the defaults in the bond market ends, what happens to the bond market?" End quote. Adding later in the interview, quote, "The bigger issue for the government is whether the real estate market can stabilize and property prices can stabilize. That can potentially ease off some of the negative wealth effects that we've been seeing since the middle of last year." End quote. And last up for the economy, US-based The New York Times, in a piece called "It is Desolate, China's Glut of Unused Car Factories," writes this week that China has more than 100 factories with the capacity to build close to 40 million internal combustion engine cars a year. Quote, "That is roughly twice as many as people in China want to buy, and sales of these cars are dropping fast as electric vehicles become more popular." End quote. Almost all of China's electric cars are assembled at newly built factories, which qualify for subsidies from municipal governments and state-directed banks. It's cheaper for automakers to build new factories than to convert existing ones, the outlet explains. Quote, "The result has been enormous overcapacity." End quote. Next up, and finally for today, we move to Europe-China developments. Yesterday we covered the arrests of 4 alleged spies for the PRC in Germany and 2 in the UK. Yesterday, German Chancellor Scholz, speaking alongside British Prime Minister Sunak, said allegations that the aide to the prominent politician had been spying for China were, quote, "very concerning," end quote, and urged more action to root out such cases. He called spying on Germany, quote, "unacceptable wherever they come from," end quote. Then the same day, Germany's domestic spy agency deputy head told companies that they should be on guard against industrial espionage by Beijing, warning them not to be, quote, "naive or over-reliant," end quote, on China. Quote, "We are now discussing new forms by authoritarian states to influence and destabilize our democracy on an almost daily basis. We are currently only seeing the tip of the iceberg. One must assume that hundreds of spies are up to mischief in Germany," end quote. Also yesterday, the EU formally announced a medical devices probe into Chinese firms. It will seek to address concerns that China unfairly favors domestic suppliers. The EU has already launched an inquiry into Chinese government backing for electric car manufacturers that could lead to new tariffs, and it is scrutinizing other industries like wind energy, solar and railways, as we have explored in previous episodes. This probe is the first use of the bloc's so-called International Procurement Instrument, a 2022 law that's meant to promote reciprocity in access to public procurement markets. With the news, PRC Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin expressed, quote, "The EU is sending a signal of protectionism, targeting China's enterprises, and it harms the image of the EU. We urge the EU to abide by its commitments to an open market and the principles of fair competition," end quote. However, after the statement, a journalist followed up by asking why Chinese firms should get easy access to Europe's market despite China never having joined the agreement and not providing European firms the same access. Wang rejected the premise of the question. State media has produced a series of articles attacking the rules passed by the European Parliament on Tuesday, which we remember was to ban goods produced by forced labor in Xinjiang. State-run The Global Times, for example, writes, quote, "This move, despite representing some China hawks within the bloc, cannot dominate the major trend of stabilizing China-EU relations, and will face strong opposition in member states which maintain a pragmatic China policy. The European Parliament has been playing a disruptive clown role in China-EU relations in recent years, but its acts cannot represent the real major trend of the bilateral ties," end quote. However, a trend seems to be clear. Europe is increasingly viewing China and Russia as part of the same axis, with trade, espionage, and military tensions, all blending into one. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a great Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow.